الحمد لله رب العالمين صلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic Oasis Live. This, in many ways, this is an emergency session that we are having regarding what's taking place in Palestine. Every one of you is wide aware of what's happening. You're seeing it on your screens. Every channel is covering what's happening. Some of the channels are being banned. Some of the channels are being promoted, depending on what side you're on. We, dear brothers and sisters, what I wanted to, inshallah, what I'm going to introduce the guest that we have today in 1 minute. Just before we go into the discussion of hasn't the world seen enough, I wanted to just kind of give you brothers and sisters the list of massacres that have been committed by this so-called state of Israel, and it's amazing. The list is beyond belief, starting with Deir Yassin massacre, which is 1948. Then it goes on to Abu Shusha massacre. This happened in 1948, May 1948. Then Tantura massacre, which happened in 1948, again in May. Then Lidda massacre, which happened in July 1948. Then Saliha or Saliha massacre, October 1948. Then Al-Dawamiya, Dawayma massacre happened in 1948, again that was October of 1948. Then Qibya massacre, October of 1953. Kafr Qasim massacre, October of 1956. Khan Yunus massacre, November 1956. Sabra and Shatila massacre, 1982. Al-Aqsa massacre, October 1990. The Ibrahimi Mosque massacre, February 1994. Jenin refugee camp, in April 2002. Killing in Gaza, the dates are just, it would take us all day, from 2008, 2009, and it goes on to 2012, then 2014, then 2018 and 2019, then 2021, and the list goes on, where we begin today at feet of another massacre of 500 babies killed, over 700 people and 748 people killed in one day, 500 of them being children, literally babies, in the hospital that everyone is witnessing. And also there are other hospitals, Al-Quds Hospital, Shifa Hospital. Many hospitals are being told that they're going to be closed or they're going to be hit. So to discuss this, we have Dr. Ayman with us. Dr. Ayman was actually recently in Palestine. He has been in and out of Palestine for decades, and grew up in Palestine, grew up in the backyard and background of all of these things that we are discussing today. So he was just there last week. We brought him up on the show to see what is he thinking, what's happening. He is a witness to a lot of things that has happened, and inshallah, we need to have this conversation, which is well beyond its due. Dr. Ayman, welcome to Islamic Oasis Live.
Jazakallah khair, ya Sheikh. I hope you can see me.
Yes, we can see you. Alhamdulillah. Yeah. Dr. Ayman, let's get right into this thing. You were in Palestine. I remember actually even just calling you just to make sure that you were okay. So what's happening in Palestine? What is going on? If you can just give us a little background of what is your understanding of what is taking place in the Holy Land?
Jazakallah khair. I actually came back last Friday. I was there for about a month and a half, and it happens that this is not the first time I was there when escalations like this happened. In 2008 I was there, 2014 I was there, 2021 I went there right after, and then 2023 I started when I was there. So number one, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, wa salatu wa salamu ala ashraf al-khalq al-mursalin, Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altahu sahla wa anta taj'al al-hazana idha shi'ta sahla رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Uh, it is too simple to understand if we put it in perspective. So the perspective is that there is a struggle between haqq and batil since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had created humanity. So since Sayyidina Adam was in Jannah, this struggle had started and it will not stop until the day of judgment. If we put it in this context, it will be very easy to understand that the issue of Palestine can only be understood. And unless you put it in this context between, a struggle between haqq and batil, we can always go back and forth and without getting a clear picture. So the haqq is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says is the haqq, and the batil, what Allah says is the batil. So to put it in context, it is a struggle between the Muslims and their vital issues that they have to keep up and keep alive and fight for and fulfill. And the batil, which is represented by the kuffar and their agents. And when I say the kuffar, I mean the enemy, the ones who do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that had put plans and strategies to prevent Islam from coming back into our lives, and by which and through which they had their agents, whether it is the Jewish state, the Zionist state in Palestine, or even the Arab rulers and the so-called Muslim rulers around. So in context, what is going on is a struggle between haqq and batil. It is a struggle between kufr and iman. It is a struggle between two civilizations, the Islamic civilization that yet to see the light again in the world arena, and the battle of capitalism and socialism and every ism you want, that the world had come together to make sure they prevent Islam from coming back. And wallahi, it's not the Western countries, it is not America, it is not Europe per se, it is everyone who didn't only directly and immediately supported the Jewish state, it is even those who are quiet and silent, whether they're Muslims or non-Muslims. So this struggle between this haqq and batil may involve the Muslims being on the other side if they stay and keep quiet and stay silent without saying what they have to say and doing what they have to do and being on the right side. So in summary, in context, this is a struggle that has been going on. It takes different forms and shapes in Palestine, in Palestine, in the Holy Land. It has been going on since the destruction of the Khilafah, actually a little bit before that. And it will not finish and will not be over with and it will not be solved until a proper solution is installed. And maybe we could talk about it today.
No, I did. I wanted to actually mention the reasons I mentioned those massacres. I mean, the list goes on. Of course, in the last 10 years, we've witnessed the massacring of the Muslims, of the Rohingya Muslims. We've seen the massacre of the Muslims of Syria for over 10 years. And we've seen the Americans have done massacres beyond belief in Iraq on a lie. Maybe close to maybe 1 million people killed in Iraq, and the list goes on. Sheikh, but the reason I'll go to that, but you being on the ground and witnessing what you are witnessing, I mean, if you can describe to us, what does occupation look like, feel like, the day-to-day lives of the Muslims in Palestine? Obviously now it's gone to a point of, of no return. And we hope that this doesn't stop at some for a meager price, that especially the price that the Muslims in Palestine are paying. What describe the life of the Muslims in Palestine?
Jazakallah khair. So just to understand, the Jewish state, the Zionist state, had separated the different parts of Palestine. So they have isolated, completely sectioned off Gaza, and they built a wall like they built around other cities in Palestine. So the Gaza territories that have been 100% secluded, cut off, and severed from the rest of the land anywhere in Palestine are one territory, and then the West Bank is another territory. And the occupied parts of Palestine, whether 1948 or 67, are also another territory. So as bad as it may sound in the West Bank, which I was in, it is actually not even 1% of how bad it is in Gaza. So whatever I can describe to you, as bad as I may sound, the situation in Gaza is many times worse, many times, that we can only, and unfortunately, we witness and see on a daily basis. So you have an occupation that deprives you from all of your rights, all of your duties, all of your dues. You cannot have proper moving between the different cities. Like for example, the city I come from, there is a wall, the 30-40 feet wall that is built, around many cities is built around my city, which is 1 mile by 1 mile. And there is a gate. So there is a wall and there is a gate. If they open the gate, then you can move back and forth in the surrounding villages or cities. And if they close the gate, you're 100% in open air prison, which is 1 mile by 1 mile. If you run out of, they cut off the water, they cut off the electricity, they cut off the supplies, they cut off the fuel. Like before I came, they cut off the fuel, and there was no fuel, in the area I was in, mainly in most areas of Palestine. So occupation everywhere, soldiers everywhere, checkpoints everywhere, arrests all the time, attacks, in the middle of the night, shooting and killing every day, humiliation and deprivation every day. Extreme poverty is the norm. Again, the list goes on. Like imagine you are not being dealt with and treated as a human being. Actually, they treat the animals better than they treat the Muslims in Palestine. And by the way, this is nothing compared to what's going on in Gaza. In Gaza is a lot worse. The only thing you don't see is the Jewish and Israeli Zionist soldiers around you, in front of you all the time, but that doesn't mean you're not humiliated, you're not deprived, you're not in jail, you're not being closed off and sieged from, and there's nothing that you could do, just waiting for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to come. So, and that's in normal days. I'm not talking about the war days. The war days, the situation is a lot worse. So for a grown-up man who grew up there, like I grew up there, and I witnessed the first Intifada. I was 10 years old, 11 years old, when the stones were
the first Intifada was when, Sheikh? If you can just give us some dates, maybe, so we can put this in
1987.
perspective.
It started
87.
in December 1987, December 14, 1987. So I was about 10, 11 years old. I was in elementary school. I remember these days where we only had stones to, our weapons and our rockets and our guns, and we're only stones, and probably the stones that may kill birds, not even more than that. And I remember these days, and we were held against the walls, and we were pushed, and we were kicked, and we were slapped, and we were put on the military trucks and bulldozers, and they put out the cigarettes on our bodies, all of that. But growing up and being used to actually gives you confidence and strength. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, imagine a kid who's 4, 5, and 6, and 7 years old, and babies 2, 3 years old, going through this, that they don't understand yet the struggle, and maybe it's something that will build them and give them strength as they grow. But you probably had seen the picture of the boy. He's probably 3, 4 years old, who's shaking. His body was shaking. The footage on Wednesday, they attacked, and his parents were killed, and he's shaking. He's in shock. He doesn't know what's going on. So that's the situation that happens in escalations like this. So the normal situations I talked about, when there are attacks and killings and shooting and arrests and deprivation and checkpoints everywhere, arrests all the time, humiliation, that's the norm. That's everyday life. And escalations like what's going on right now, that's beyond something and anybody can actually imagine, where they bring buildings down, hospitals down, schools down. On top of their, more than 1,500 children have been killed, and babies, for the past 15 days. That's an average of 100 child/baby every day. So imagine how these could be dealt with. So in escalations like this, I am nowhere in a situation to describe for you actually what's going on in Gaza, because it's beyond what a human being can bear and say. So may Allah give them strength and support and patience, and may Allah give us the strength to give them the support that they need and the help they need. But to describe in a nutshell the situation, it is occupation. And if you haven't been under occupation, imagine you're in jail. And if you haven't been in jail, imagine you have no choice of what to dress, what to eat, where to go, when to sleep, when to wake up. You don't have anything. You have no resources. You have no electricity. You have no internet. You have no phone. So that's a situation of somebody who's under occupation. It's somebody like in jail. So your honor, your dignity, your will, your capacity, all of that, this feeling of incapacity and not being able to do something and you're deprived of everything is what you feel if you're under the occupation. It doesn't mean you're depressed. It doesn't mean that you will not do anything, but it means that's what is the norm under occupation.
Sheikh, let's, I've been to Gaza. I'm sure, I've seen Gaza. I stayed 1 week in Gaza, and but you're not allowed to go to Gaza.
Absolutely not. And by the way, the times you went to Gaza is not anytime
Of course,
time soon. So
of course,
you've
of course.
been
No, no,
to
no. This is
Gaza a
hell.
long time
No,
ago.
no, no. I understand. Even then, it was. Of course, I understand. What I'm saying, what I'm pointing out to, is that foreigners are. Yani it's. The Muslims in Palestine are prisoners in their own lands, while people who are coming to visit Palestine, who are supposed, they're coming, supposed tourists who are coming to Palestine, and or whatever, humanitarian workers, they're allowed to move around more than the Palestinians themselves in the area, which belongs to them.
Most of the time. Like, for example, I haven't been able to go to Masjid al-Aqsa for maybe 6 years now, and I had to get a special permit, and I had to apply for it, and I had to be interviewed, and they had to have me sign on something that I will not do anything, I will leave on time, do all of that. And since then, 2017, I haven't been in Jerusalem. So most of the people who are under the age of 50 are not very easily able to get to Al-Aqsa, and let alone the rest of Palestine. So not even actually, I remember when I got married 2006, they denied my wife, and she was never in Palestine, even though she was originally from Palestine. She was born and raised in the US. Her parents were refugees 1948 in Jordan. Again, migrated to America. She was born here. So even then, she never seen Palestine. She was never there, only American passport, and she was denied entry. So that does not go on everybody, that if you are a humanitarian or tourist, it doesn't mean that you're going to be granted the entry there. And
So
a lot of times they
you're on
only
the
give
mercy
you
of.
Palestinian territory only.
So what does that mean, Sheikh? So how what have they done here? So you have what does, yani, when we say West Bank now, right? So you have Ramallah, you have Quds area, you have. Can you describe to us what is West Bank?
Quds area is not part of the West Bank. So Al-Quds, the Yahud did not negotiate, did not say anything about. So they didn't classify it. So the West Bank is basically, in generic terms, is what was occupied 1967, which was in a confederal agreement with the Jordanian government. So 1967, call it occupied territory, is what is referred to as the West Bank, because before that it was the East Bank, which is Jordan now, and the West Bank, which is Palestine. So that's historically. So the West Bank is the whole Palestine, the East Bank is Jordan, and these are the two banks of the Jordanian River. So the Jordanian River, east of which is the East Bank, which is Jordan, and the west of which is the West Bank, which is Palestine. But that's historically. Generically and more like practically speaking, now when you say West Bank, it is the territory that was occupied in 1967. And to be more specific, it is Hebron down in the south, Al Khalil, and then Beit Lahem, and then you have Ramallah. These are the major cities in the south. And then you would have Nablus, you would have Jenin, you would have Tulkarem, you have Qalqiya. These are the seven, they're not provinces because they're too small to be a province, but the seven cities and the surrounding areas. But it's not complete and continuous. Even that, it is not complete. So when between, for example, Qalqiya and Nablus, which is about 20 miles or less, there are multiple checkpoints. The one who controls the street, which is not even a highway, is the so-called Israeli territory, is the Zionist forces. Multiple checkpoints. They control the roads. They can close them off anytime. As soon as you leave that closed off and walled city, you are not in the West Bank, even though it is called West Bank, because you are under the 100% occupation, control the streets. You don't see any of the Palestinian Authority, which doesn't mean anything. They're actually agents to the Yahud, and they're established for the purpose of providing security to the occupation state. So it's not even complete areas where you can move freely. So the West Bank is chopped off, cut off, severed off, separate cities where majority population and the rest of the land is controlled 100% by the Jewish occupation.
Sheikh, I'm sure you are observing what took place today. This morning, there's a conference that was going on held by Cairo in Egypt. I don't know any other way to describe them, but the supposed leaders of the Muslim world, they were all slaves. They came together. And I was listening to many of the speeches that were being given by the foreign secretary. I think it was Turkey, and then of course there was UAE. Everybody was talking, Sheikh, and then they were pushing, of course, this idea of the two-state solution. Mahmoud Abbas spoke, and so-called Abu Mazen or whoever. Sheikh, let me ask you this: do you think, or is it a far-fetched theory to say that what is taking place now in many ways was done to either to make Israel accept the two-state solution by force, or is it to finalize a solution in the region because the Americans want to create some type of a security in the region so they can move on and look at what's happening in China?
So to really understand this, I got to go back a little bit in history. So 1897, 1907, pre-World War, First World War, 1914, and then 1917. So you have major international conferences in which and by which the Western Crusader countries have come together to agree on implanting a cancerous body in the heart of the Muslim lands, because the collapse of the Khilafah state at that time, the Uthmani Khilafah, was imminent. So it was in the final stages. It was, the dead man. Mustafa Kemal already took over. The Khalifa is just, nothing but a face. So they were planning ahead to make sure that they delay as much as possible, if not prevent the return of Islam again. So the idea and the plan was to implant a state in the heart of the Muslim lands that will prevent the Muslims from coming back and uniting together. Number one. Number two, it will be the first line of defense, if needs to, that the West will use to protect their interest and again keep indoctrinating Muslims. So they picked the Jewish people and they picked the Zionists because it was very easy to sell the idea to them. Number one, they think they're the chosen people and they think this is the promised land, so this is your promised land, you're the chosen people. To mix the religious attribute with the political goals and gains, the best to sell this idea to and implant in the heart of the Muslim lands, because no other European nation would have accepted, no other people would have accepted to be in an ocean of Muslims, being surrounded with everybody who says that Muhammad Rasulullah. So anytime, so it was easy to sell to them, so they accepted that. That was the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. So as Britain colonized Palestine after the destruction of the Khilafah state, after the First World War, and they pulled out 1930s, and in time, the immigration and the migration of the Yahud was being done and controlled by the Western countries, so that 1947, 1948 were able to declare the establishment of the so-called Israel. So the goal and the objective of the establishment and the implantation of a foreign state called Israel is to make sure that this is their first line of defense against any sincere and proper unity of the Muslims to come across, and also to prevent that from happening to begin with. So, and to prove that, by the way, there are many conferences. I can bring names. Just recently, in 2002, 2003, Ariel Sharon, who was one of their most prominent, terrorist prime ministers, he said, wrote two articles actually. In one of them, he said that the West had established Israel, and it is its responsibility to maintain it and protect it. In another article, he explained that. He said that, again, I quote the article, Israel is a cheap agent because he drew a comparison between if America or the West were to move aircraft carrier, one aircraft carrier will cost more than $3 billion to maintain in 1 year. So the power of Israel at that time, military power, is equivalent to 10 aircraft carriers, according to what he said, even though it was supposed to be more. So he said that America only pays to the Jewish state or the Zionist state only $3 billion a year. Whereas if America were to move its aircraft carrier to the region, it would cost America more than $30 billion a year. So as a result, Israel is a cheap agent because we are protecting their interest. And to prove that, also Biden, when he was a senator in 1986, he said, and I quote by word, the $3 billion we give to the state of Israel is the best investment we've ever made. If there were no Israel, we would have invented one.
Yeah.
To protect our interest in the area. He repeated the same thing in 2011, 2014, 2016, and 2023 on Wednesday. So last Wednesday, he repeated the exact same word. He said, if there were no Israel, we would have invented one, again, for the purpose of protecting the interest. So to understand all of that as a foundation for my answer, there's not one sane person, and I don't care if he's sincerely, understanding and looking at the situation in Palestine, or even promoting the so-called Arab rulers and regimes and defending their position. There isn't a sane person who will defend the Arab regimes and say that they are sincere to their people, that they look after the interest of their people, that their policies and their agenda is to, protect and provide and to excel with their own people. So their agenda is to depress and suppress and, jail and kill and humiliate and put in jail their own people, let alone the rest of the Muslims. They're all secular. They're, if they're not kuffar, they're sellouts. They don't even belong to humanity, man. Their manhood died in them. They're the youth, as we say in Arabic. They have no dignity. They have no honor. They have no manners, no morals. Actually, today before I came onto the show, I was reading that there is a big distress in the foreign ministry in the U.S. government. In the foreign ministry, there is a big distress because a lot of the politicians and the workers are not very happy with how America took one side.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at these such sellouts and Arab, they're all very happy. They're just implementing these policies. So we actually don't expect anything to. Matter of fact, if they come together in a conference like this, the only thing that is going to happen is worse to come to the Muslims. We don't expect anything good from them. They're not good for that. They're not meant for that. They will not be allowed to do anything like that. They've accepted a position of a tyrant, ruler, traitor, someone who would work with the kuffar and the enemy against his own people. They don't abide by the rules of Islam. They don't abide by the rules of humanity even. So when they come together in a conference like this, I know for a fact, like for a fact, like everyone who's listening and everyone who has a sane mind would understand that they're conspiring against Islam and Muslims. So they better not come together, and we better, make sure that such conspiracies and such conferences do not come out and come to life. So they're only coming out to conspire against us.
Understood. But Sheikh, I mean, look, since October 7th, with everything that is going on, why, is there, do you see a foreign hand in what took place on October 7th?
Okay, so I'm gonna be very frank, Sheikh. This is not a time where I would talk or I would criticize or I would point out or I would say anything. Just to be clear, so you and I and everyone who's listening and watching or will watch in the future, understand very well our position. I will not ever say that what's going on in Gaza, and especially the way it started, was planned. I will never say, and I would actually stand against anybody who might say that this is part of a conspiracy that was, part of an agenda that was, planned. this is a time when we stand and we support our brothers and sisters who are suffering
there's no question about that.
No. I understand, inshallah.
Yeah,
of course, I know you didn't say that. I just want to make sure we make this stand.
Let's make that clear. But what I'm asking you is that
the kuffar will absolutely take advantage. They will ride the wave. They will twist and they will take every possible and impossible advantage to make sure that they twist everything for their own sake and within their capacity. So America will ride the wave. The Arab rulers will ride the wave. Europe will ride the wave. Everybody is going to take advantage and say, yeah, and claim something for their own. But what we see clear, again, we have to look at the bigger picture. Let me
put the question in perspective, Sheikh. Here's the thing. I understand what you're saying. I see that you're wearing the Khilafah flag on your chest. So I mean, don't get me wrong. That's not the point here. The point is of my questioning is that there's a lot of Muslims, I'm sure, are thinking that this when they're looking at the whole picture in the region, when they're looking at what happened on that day, who could this have been planned in a place like Gaza? So that's a question that is, obviously newspapers are writing this, analysts are writing this. This is going to be something that will be written in many books and in many intelligence analysis that how did this happen. But let's go back to the movements that exist in this area. I mean, so you have, I mean,
can I just address that for a quick moment?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So looking at micro details a lot of times does not help in ideological struggle like this. As I said, this is another if you want, turn between the struggle of the struggle between haq and batil. So the game is, or the plan was and has been and will be, for the kufr forces to plan and conspire against Islam and its return. So this is the main line. If we don't put it in this perspective and this context, you can never. So we can talk about who did what and when and all.
No. The reason, because you mentioned that. I was not the one that mentioned that. You said Palestinian Authority, who are literally their agents. These are your words. So I'm basically, I understand what you're saying.
Has nothing to do with the Palestinian Authority. Has nothing. They don't part. Matter of fact,
no, I'm talking about the conference that's taking place. When I mentioned the conference, that there's a conference that's taking place in Egypt, and then of course, I don't know if you saw his talk. He said we are the only ones that represent the Palestinian people, and I'm sure that was very well put together. Right. So now the thing is, Sheikh, that you have so many movements within this area, right? You have Hamas, you have PLO, you have Democratic something, you have Palestinian Authority, you have all of this different Kataib, you have different let's call it resistance for the sake of the argument here. Let's call them resistance. Is the resistance united in the goal? Do they look at and I'm saying this on a background of what happened in Syria. In Syria, for instance, you had over 1,000 fasail and 1,000 different movements. And every one of them was bought out by the Qataris, by UAE, by the GCC, by all these different movements were given money, and then the whole revolution was in many ways sold out. And now we are again stuck to a point that it's beyond belief. Even the people, sincere people, are looking and in Syria and saying, what the heck did we do? Now, looking at that, is the resistance in Palestine mature enough to realize what needs to be done in order to achieve a real victory, and that the blood of the Muslims is not spilled again for no real achievements?
Jazakallah khair. So I will not mention names. I'll be objective, and I'll give you a clear understanding of the situation. So anybody who was sincere among the groups that were not Islamic, and to mention names, whether it is PLO or the Democratic or the Socialist or the Nationalist or all of these guys. So anybody who was sincere uh, and fought for the purpose of fighting to free his land, or fight fi sabilillah, that's one category. Everybody else is on the other camp. So I don't care if they were fighting to free Palestine, or they're fighting because that's their nationalistic, their Arab, whatever. But if they do that and they understand and they know the plan and they're part of the plan knowingly, and they implement the objectives and the agenda and the plots of the kuffar knowingly, like for example PLO, who since their inception, we know how they came about. Actually, they were established 1965, before the occupation of Palestine 1967. Now, how could you be established 1965 and then you call for the establishment of the Palestinian state over the 1967 borders? So the ones who were sincere in the PLO, they already left PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. So anybody who's sincere will not actually accept to join such movements and such a group, because they know they are part of the problem, they're not part of the solution. And that doesn't go for the other resistance groups, which is Hamas, Al Jihad. These are brothers that we've witnessed, we've seen, and I'm talking about the ones who carry the guns, the ones who put their souls in their hands and say Bismillah and go out and try to show the enemy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which Allah is pleased with. These I'm not gonna say anything about them, because their actions speak for themselves. What happens after that, and I always address this issue in my khutbahs and my speeches. I just gave a talk on Thursday at UIC, and a main message I gave, I said, to the crowns on my heads, to those who had lifted our spirits and our souls, to those who had shown the kuffar that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is pleased with, this is a message to you. Do not accept any deal that is struck by such corrupt rulers. Do not accept and be part of any deal that America is trying to build. So on the ground, of course, you will have sometimes this and you will have that. But the average and the common, and this is more important, the average Muslims in Palestine and the common man on the street, including even the kid who's maybe 7 or 10 years old, understand that Palestine is only going to be a Muslim land. We don't accept two states. So this is an agenda and a kufr plan. No two-state solution. Yes, some of them may say that we may accept, at least we can have a foothold that, and then after that we could take and charge from there. But that's out of naivety and out of misunderstanding. But to accept the fact that the Zionist state has the right to exist alongside with the Muslims in Palestine, there's no sane person who says that. And matter of fact, again, I go to Palestine almost every year. This year is very different, even including those who call themselves PLO, and their sentiment and their spirit is much different this time than the times before. They're actually 100%, not 99%. And I'm not talking about those who are being paid to defend the Abbas and the Palestinian Authority. I'm talking about the ones who call themselves PLO, but they're not being benefiting from the status quo. 100% with the jihad in Palestine, 100% against the any deal, 100% against two-state solution, 100% against the humiliation of the Palestinian Authority and the acceptance of their position to be the guardians of the security of the Yahud. So yes, you do have this and that in resistant groups. But the atmosphere, the consensus is definitely jihad is the way to free Palestine. And this freedom will not come through fighting from within Palestine. This is a spark that we have to keep. I'm telling you from inside. This is the sentiment from inside. Our fighting is the spark that has to be kept on so that the Muslims can wake up. So, and again, as you see, they call on the Muslims. They call on, maybe the message is not very clear to call on to the Muslim armies that is the only solution to free Palestine. But they call on to the Muslims to come to their aid and their help, and to the Muslims help in Palestine, because that's the consensus. Palestine needs to be helped by the rest of the Muslims, and it is not a two-state solution. And they, even though it is enforced on them, but that's not the consensus.
So when we talk about two-state solution, so your two-state solution means exactly what? Can you describe what is the two-state solution? What does that actually look like?
The two-state solution means the Muslims are going to recognize and accept the Zionist state and its right of existence. They will accept that it will take control, actually 100% control over 80% of Palestine, and they will have control over the rest of the 20% of Palestine. So the only thing that it's going to be final, we're going to give you some area like, it's funny, if you know Palestine, they're going to give you a village which is adjacent to Al-Quds, and we call it, this is your capital as Al-Quds. All the settlements which engulf the West Bank and the borders occupied 1967, all of these will be so-called Israeli territories. So the Palestinian state, which is to be accepted, is going to be securing the borders and the security of the Zionist state, and this is done by the Muslims' hands. There's no more struggle. There is no more Hamas or jihad. There's no more of resistance. There's no more of fighting the Yahud. You're going to accept, and you're going to recognize, and you're going to deal with, and the Jewish state is going to control over 90% of Palestine, physically, militarily, economically, politically, and everything else. So in other words, you're going to be working as a Palestinian Authority as agents for the Yahud, as they have been, to provide security for them.
Okay, so
the only thing that will be different is the recognition by everyone in Palestine, especially the Islamic groups, to recognize the Yahud state, the Zionist state, and agree not to pick up arms anymore against them. So that's what they're looking for. So what's going on right now in Cairo, in Egypt, is a conference that America has planned, because America does ride the wave and does take advantage, to put it in perspective with your previous question. So this is what America is trying to do now. This is a very hot situation. Both sides are very tired. The Israeli side is very tired, is very desperate. It's almost collapsing. I can force them. This is what America is thinking. I can force them to strike a deal and accept to give a little bit more to the Palestinians, and accept to live adjacent to the so-called Palestinian state, which will be deprived from anything that calls it a state. And then also the Muslims in Gaza are very exhausted. We have killed enough of them, so they will accept for the deal that we're going to provide for them. So that's, if you want to speak like that, this is the game. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, and that's what I want you to speak, because I think the whole idea of this show is to be able to discuss things that are normally not spoken. I mean, we want to clarify to the masses, Sheikh. When people are listening to what's happening in this region, people need to have a very clear idea of the plots and plans that are taking place. Now, let me ask you this, Sheikh. Iran, you have Hezbollah in Lebanon. There's a lot going on in that part of the world, and they what is the role of Iran? What has Iran done in the region in general? And let me, of course, in Lebanon and maybe now in Palestine, Hezbollah is called Hezbollah, and of course in Syria they call them Hezbollah, and I'm sure these things exist. And what are they thinking, Akhi? What is Iran thinking? What will Iran gain out of it? Of this, the idea that there's always this discussion that's happening that Iran may enter this war, the idea of escalation. Is Iran being used as a bait that there could be an escalation if Israel doesn't accept the idea of two-state solution? Because it's very clear that Israel, what happened October 7th, it almost looks like we can see how fragile the reality of Israel is. I mean, they're desperate. It seems, as you mentioned, they don't want the ground invasion. Today, again, I think people have been waiting for 10 days, 15 days. They thought there'll be a ground invasion. Now, I've heard in some articles that there may not be a ground invasion if maybe 10 months and 3 months, 4 months. What's happening, Akhi? What does, first of all, ground invasion mean? Second, the role of Iran in this whole situation.
So let's start with Iran and Hizb al-Shaytan. I don't even call it Hizbullah, it's Hizb al-Shaytan. Because the Shaitan does plan, and the Shaitan had taken an oath to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he will continue to conspire and plan against Islam and Muslims and those who believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the day of judgment. So there's no doubt, based on information and facts and actions and policies on the ground, that Iran's policies and Iran's interest is to protect and maintain and serve the interest of the US in the region. And that's not a secret. If you look since 1980 or 1979, since Khomeini came in power, Iran has not done anything whatsoever. This has been more than 40 years, 44 years since Khomeini came into power. There hasn't been one single thing that Iran has done that we can recall and we can look at to say that this serves the interest of the Muslims or its own people or anything in the area or in the region. They only had fulfilled the interest of the US government. And a lot of the Iranian presidents or whatever mullahs, they come out, they're actually direct American agents like Al-Khomeini. And I don't care about who's gonna hear me and who's gonna say what. You go back and what happened and the communication and the CIA reports, and even though I don't take from the kuffar, the news, but nevertheless, the fact on the ground and the actions and the reality does prove what the CIA came out many times and said that Al-Khomeini does communicate, does work, and does serve their interests. So Iran works to serve the interest of the US. Hizb al-Shaytan or Hizbullah is 100% funded, controlled, organized, and directed by the Iranian regime. If you put these two things in context, along with what happened in Syria for 10 years, the one who actually was able to sustain and support and protect the regime in Syria and kill hundreds of thousands of Muslims is the Iranian regime and Hizb al-Shaytan. So if we understand all of that, that they work to fulfill and serve the interest of the kuffar in the area, and also they have shown that they had no mercy in killing hundreds of thousands of Muslims just recently, few years ago until now, is still going on. So why would I accept anything good or accept the idea that they are doing or they will be doing anything that will be for the interest of the Muslims? So America is using them again since the October 7th started, the Aqsa flood started. Hezbollah Hizb al-Shaytan has been declaring that we're watching, we will see what happens. So this is the plan. If Netanyahu and the Israeli government does not listen and does not accept that the deal America is trying to strike, America is trying to conceal, which is finally to bring these two parties together, the Palestinians and the Jews and the Zionists, and accept on a final deal so America can look for its own interests somewhere else in the region, somewhere else in the world. So I don't have to worry about this conflict. I want to secure my interest. Unless America does that, and unless the Jewish state and Zionists accept that, America will use the stick and tell Hizb al-Shaytan, go ahead and participate. So they're not going to participate out of sincerity. They're not going to participate because they care and they worry about Palestine and the Muslims and their blood. It has been shed many, many times. So we've seen in 2021 similar attack on the Muslims in Gaza. Where was Hizb al-Shaytan? Why would now Hizb al-Shaytan, and there's so much talk about Hizb al-Shaytan, effect and influence and be the capacity and ability. And we know, and this is by the testimony of everybody, it's probably 10 or 20 times the power and the strength of Hamas in Gaza. So where is this and why would you keep it? Who do you keep it for and who's to be used against? So I don't trust. Actually, if they participate, you know that America is going forward with its plan. If they do not participate, I would say yet, maybe, hopefully, no. But if they do participate, I know this is Americans' plot and plan. I still don't trust either way. They're both Iran, and that's directly and indirectly Hizb al-Shaitan are protecting and serving the American interest. But one thing I really want to clarify, ya Sheikh, here before I go to the other question, other part of the question. Look, it's not just America. This is the whole kuffar coming together. If you look at America, Britain, UK, France, Germany, Italy, all of the European countries, all the kuffar, all the what was called before the Romans and the Byzantines, and they were called the Crusaders later on. Now they're forming again more and other allies against Islam and Muslims. Let's put it in this context, and they will use every tool and every technique. And we can talk about more details of the plot and the plan and who's doing what. But this is a global and international alliance that is forming again and again, and we see it many times against Islam and Muslims and the return of Islam in a way of life. So, and that actually takes me to another point. Why is it that in the media and in the Western countries, mainly in America and Europe, they're trying to build this public opinion in their own people, in their own countries, against Islam and Muslims, and stand, one-sided, 100% with the Jewish state? It is actually because of two reasons. Number one, they do want to alienate Muslims. They want to make sure that Muslims don't think about moving or taking any actions or supporting their brothers and sisters. Number two, they want to build their own internal side to make sure that they build this public opinion against Islam and Muslims. They see what we don't see. They expect and they probably project that Muslims will very soon become united. And I want to make sure that my own people, speaking of them, they're already ready and prepared for what to come in the future. So just to add another point, it's not just Iran and Hezbollah. We have to look also at the bigger picture of them forming again another, Crusader alliance against Islam and Muslims. I'm sorry, Sheikh, I missed the other part of the question. What was the other part?
Let me just before the question, I just brothers and sisters, I've been told that if you have any questions, to go ahead and ask those questions, and then ask Dr. Ayman. We'll place those questions to him, inshallah. No, Sheikh, the issue of escalation, I guess you answered, what escalation actually means here. Escalation means that another point of pressure by the United States here in order to get either Israel or the Palestinian Authority or whoever now represents to get them to accept the two-state solution. Sheikh, according to what you said, majority of the Muslims in Palestine don't accept the idea of two-state solution. Or is it that it's gotten to a point where they're so desperate that anything will work at this point?
Wallahi, ya Sheikh, I see it the other way, exactly the other way around. At times of less pressure and less escalation, you feel like the people are being blinded a little bit by chasing, this world and this life and, fighting poverty and political corruption, all that. But in situations like this, actually, they're more alienated. So by the will and decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's not all evil. So even though we see the killing and the oppression and the destruction and the unimaginable amount of inhumane shelling and killing, but at the same time, there is goodness that comes out of it. And I don't know if you saw these videos of these 5 and 7 and 10 years old kids that are coming out and say, well, you're not going to make us bow out of these, pressure and these killings. It only makes us stronger. You don't think, we know the plans, we know the plots, we know the games. So it only exposes the plots and the plans of the kuffar. It only exposes, the hypocrisy in their systems. It only exposes the hypocrisy and the corruption and the tyranny and also the traitorship that the Muslim rulers and some of their allies have actually. So that does help in a way to build even a stronger opinion against any future solution that will grant the Zionist state the right of existence. So I actually backfires on them where the Muslims take it to the extreme again of refusing such deals.
Sheikh, there's I'm sure you saw the statement coming out of Afghanistan also. I think many Muslims were expecting a much different statement than the statement that we unfortunately heard from the region. I think it was Sirajuddin, one of them, said something like, we do not accept or we do not intervene in the affairs of other Muslim countries. Sheikh, what does that tell you? I mean, and you know, he went on to say that, look, we ourselves fought a 20-year war against the West, against the United States, and then we freed ourselves. So we understand that your heroic stand that you're taking, and that this is the way to free yourself. I mean, is this a statement to say that, well, you're on your own?
So number one, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and I make dua for him, that Allah, show him mercy and show him guidance and repentance and, forgiveness as well. I just want to remind that the Muslims are all one body. Even though I have a different opinion regarding the jihad in Afghanistan in 1980, 80s, when America and the Arab rulers actually promoted fighting against the Soviet Union when the Soviet Union occupied Afghanistan. But majority of the Muslims who went to fight in Afghanistan from outside Afghanistan were from the Muslims in Palestine, whether they resided in Jordan, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, or America. So a lot of the Muslims who did go to fight in Afghanistan were from the Muslims from Palestine, because our pain is one, our problems are one, our enemy is one, our efforts should be together, our unity will be, inshallah. So for him to say that, this is absolutely not accepted for two reasons. Because again, we are all one. My problem is his problem is my problem. But what's unfortunate is that, and we did warn Taliban to strike a deal with America when they were sitting in Qatar for many years. America was humiliated in Afghanistan. They actually had to pay a very, very heavy price. Why would you accept? It is defeated. It's looking for any a dignified way to come out of Afghanistan. Why would you accept to deal with it and sign a deal and to be somehow connected with? I actually wasn't surprised. I expected that. But he does not represent the majority of the Muslims in Afghanistan. When October 7th happened, again, we had heard many voices coming from Afghanistan and coming from Taliban that they wanted to move to help free Palestine.
Of course. I mean, this is a sentiment across the whole Muslim world. This is why in the last 5 days, this is probably the fourth show, because everyone wants to know what's going on, what's happening, what can we do. The whole ummah is shaking upside down. We've had, I mean, people are traveling hour, 2 hour to come to us and discuss what should be the plan of the Muslims. And I want to come to that, inshallah, to discuss what should be the plan of the Muslims. Because, there's a talk. I mean, I've seen the calls that are being made that, look, the armies must move. Sheikh, when we say armies or must move, there is a reason why these armies are not moving. They are being run by the capitalists. They're being run by the Democrats or these democracies, and they are, or if not, dictatorships. This is the reason why they are not moving. When we say moving, in what context are we talking here? Moving meaning get rid of your rulers, and moving meaning that, are you asking the rulers to move the army? Or are we saying that there must be a coup in the Muslim world? Because I don't see it any other way, to be honest, Annie. I can't see where, I mean, when I look at the situation in Jordan, I mean, I'm sure you're watching, and people are doing everything possible to cross over on the borders, and literally, they're asking for the hudud to be open constantly. They're running towards the hudud. They're going after the embassies, both the Israeli, the American embassy in Jordan. The police is overwhelmed. The military is overwhelmed. And I'm sure they're looking at their own sons and their own daughters in the protests, standing in front of them protesting, saying, how can we expect this kind of humiliation? But again, they are not moving. And they're literally in the backyard, Sheikh. I mean, I'm sure some of them can probably even hear the bombings taking place.
So to understand what the kuffar had done to ensure, so the army is a gun. The army is the power and the force. So, and this gun and this tank and this jet could be in the hands of those who are sincere, and could be in the hands of those who are insincere. So to make sure that this gun and this rocket and this jet and this tank is in the hand of the one that we don't want it to be, controlling it. So they did multiple things. Number one, they have, I'm going to say the words in Arabic and hopefully I can help translate. So they have the mukhabarat. So mukhabarat are the secret services that will spy on the people. They will spy on everybody, right? And they have the istikhbarat. So these are the secret services that will spy on the mukhabarat. So even if the mukhabarat does not do his job, I will make sure that there is another agency, another level of intelligence that will tell on you and spy on you. And then you have the third complex level of al-istikhbarat al-askariya. So the military secret services that will spy on both. They will spy on the military and they will spy on the spies who spy on the spies. So it is almost four levels of intelligence to ensure that, and they make it very well known. So if you're going to be working, and they go to the lowest of the lowest people, they go to the sellouts, they go to those who will accept to take the vanished gain in this life on the expense of their akhirah, and they will say, hey, we'll pay you this much, we'll do this much, you have this position, you'll be in charge of this, on the condition that you're going to spy, or on the condition you're going to spy on the spies, on the condition you're going to be. So it doesn't matter almost after that who's going to be, a commander, who's going to be infantry. I don't know the terminology in English for the army. So the middle class generals and under, it doesn't really matter if you're that sincere or not, because I have chained you and shackled you enough with the services, the secret services and the military services, secret services, that if you even whisper to yourself about doing something or think of something, I will know about it and you'll be, punished with a capital punishment. So the only ones that they choose very carefully, and I don't think any of them belong to this ummah, are the military and the army leaders. So these 3 or 4 or 5 guys who are the very top, at the very top, these guys, I don't think they actually belong to the Muslims, or they live in the Muslim lands, or they actually know what's going on in the Muslim lands, or they care about if anything happens to the Muslim lands. So we're not calling upon those to begin with. We're not calling upon those who have already sold everything they have, whether their integrity or their deen or their life or their family or their consciousness. We're not even addressing those, because those, if you were to call a kafir, it would probably be easier than calling them. We're talking about those who still fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're talking about those who the love of Allah is still in their heart. The aqidah is still alive in their heart. It might be covered with some dust. It might be very unclear. They might be afraid. They might be chained. They might be shackled. But there is goodness in their heart. There is a aqidah that is alive in their hearts. They still worry about their ummah. They still see themselves as belonging to them. We're talking about those. So when we call upon those. That's number one. Number two, I'm not calling the Muslims and the masses to go to the borders. Actually, that's impractical, because the force is going to be there and the army is going to be there to prevent them, and if need to kill them. I'm asking the Muslims to call upon the army that is my brother and your brother, your father and my son and your son, my neighbor and your neighbor, and everybody's neighbor, and everybody's son, and everybody's father, and everybody's brother. So we're talking about the Muslims, again, calling upon such armies, number one. Number two, we're talking about Muslims, instead of going to the borders, go to the military camps, go to the army camps, go to the military colleges, go to the military institutions. So you go over there, you call upon them. We're not talking about going and attacking them. We're talking about them calling upon those who are sincere to reclaim that which is ours, that gun that is ours, that rocket that is ours, that tank that is ours. I'm talking about the army that is ours. So we're calling upon the Muslims to call upon the army generals and commanders who are in the middle class or the middle rows, who have the capacity to either neutralize the army, for some Muslims to move politically and have a coup to topple the government, or those who have this capacity to actually remove and isolate the ruler and hand over the power to the one who's sincere. So this is something that I may do individually, but it is better done as part of a group and a party. So I'm not only calling upon Muslims to go down and protest on the streets. Actually, I don't do that per se. I tell them what's right. I tell them the proper way to do it. I tell them the proper group to do it with. I tell them how it needs to be done. I tell them how afterwards, how it should be handled. So it is not a vague solution. So when I say call upon the armies, this is very simple, straightforward. And I'm not talking about those who are, the highest level of leadership in the army, because there is almost no hope in them. They don't even belong to this ummah. I'm talking about those who still come to pray, those who look at themselves as Muslims, who worry about and care about the Muslims. They are shackled and they are chained by all the complexity of the system that is imposed on them. But I'm telling them, go and work with the political organizations that call upon them, that work with them, that reaches out to them, that has a plan to deal with them. So that's what I talk to Muslims, and tell them what to do.
That might take a session by itself. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot
Of course.
to unpack. But so okay, no. At least some type of clarity should be given to the Muslims when you're saying that the armies should move. And that's why I wanted to, Sheikh, a question here regarding. So is capitalism completely failing now? And when we look at this situation, of course, we are not, at least I'm sure you're not also looking at the state of the affairs of the world in isolation. We are, we're looking at Israel that claims to be the biggest democracy or the only democracy in the Arab world. You're looking at capitalism that is dominating this, this region and this, unfortunately, the world today. And we see the bloodshed. And it seems the capitalists are willing to kill as many babies as possible to achieve their interests. And so are we seeing that capitalism is desperate to go to this beyond what animals might do in order to achieve their goals? Or is it that that's how capitalism is, and now we're seeing the picture more clearly?
Well, actually, it's not a secret. You go from the First World War, the Second World War, where capitalism against capitalism, capitalist country against capitalist country, more than 100 million people between the First World War, Second World War, and the resulting, famine and deprivation after that. So it is not a secret that capitalism is mixed with blood and pain and suffering. That's no doubt. It's the rule of the few for the benefit of the few. Absolutely, it's not the rule of people for the people by the people, even though by definition that is, but it is for the benefit of the few. So just to put it in context, if we had seen that America is and was willing to attack itself in September 11 and destroy its symbol of civilization and commerce, and have 3,000 people or more die in an attack. Actually, they're willing to sacrifice millions of Muslims because they don't even come close to as first class citizens like those who killed in September 11. So if America did that for its own people in its own lands, we know what they might do and will do against anybody they call enemy. So they have identified Islam as an enemy. They have identified Islam as the terror that we have to. So the war on terror and the war on Islam is the same. So I will not be surprised to actually see America doing again another September 11, but it might be in the Jewish state, in the Zionist state, or somewhere else in the European countries, to push an agenda that will help the few who control the capitalist countries, have gain and control and power over the rest of the people. They have killed the indigenous, the Red Indians, They have actually thrown blankets that are infested, and uh, 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 again, it's not a secret. So it's definitely capitalism is a failing system. It had failed its people. It does not provide for them. The world is suffering from its effects, and it will continue to suffer until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us, establish something else.
Okay, final question, inshallah. Sheikh, the when we look at the situation in Palestine, in the West, there is a lot of activism going on. Right, streets of London are packed. European capitals are going upside down. The Muslim world, of course, also was going up and down, and is going up and down, or upside down. There seems to be, when it comes to Palestine, there is this idea of people from all kinds of backgrounds coming out and showing themselves as activists, right? I mean, let's go to downtown and let's just have a protest, and people are screaming and yelling, sometimes not even without a clear vision, even running around with this flag that even sometimes with even compromising their own values in order to just get more numbers, to just demonstrate in the name of activism, or in the name of human rights and this and that. But why don't we see them, the same people, for Kashmir? Or why don't we see the same people and a kind of the type of support for the Muslims, the Rohingya Muslims, or the Uyghur Muslims, or what do you think it is, Sheikh? I mean, is it marketing that's been done right, or what is the issue here?
Subhanallah, it's actually, I look at it differently. It's not that I'm very happy that Muslims do not respond to the crisis and do not do anything about the crisis that happened outside the Palestine, but Muslims do
I understand Baitul
recognize
Maqdis.
Palestine.
I'm talking.
Yes.
I understand it's Baitul
That's
Maqdis
my
issue.
point.
But the thing is, other than Baitul Maqdis for the Muslimin, and I'm looking at even the kuffar are out there on the streets. Then they were not out there for the revolutions that were happening. They were not out there, but because it's like you see the signs of Che Guevara, out there, and you find all these people out there with, these socialists and communists and human rights against capitalism, and look at the bloodletting and all of that. We also see that with the Muslims. Unfortunately, in that same, there is that existence of that type of understanding of activism, unfortunately, that exists. So I guess, I just wanted to understand your take on that. Just before we go.
Jazakallah khair. So in a nutshell, number one, for Muslims, it is an issue that is connected to their aqidah. So Baitul Maqdis was our first qibla. It is the holy land that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed. Bismillah ar-Rahim, subhana alladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan min al-masjid al-harami ila al-masjid al-aqsa alladhi barakna hawlahu. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed this land and connected it to our aqidah and made it an obligation that we should take it as such. So it is different than the land that is anywhere. That's one thing. The other thing is, Muslims do recognize their responsibility to that, because it is also taken and occupied by the lowest of the people. So being a holy land, being part of our aqidah, occupied by the Zionists, as the Quran described them, the sons of whoever and the enemies of Kilda. So if you put these two together, and the feeling of guilt and the feeling of responsibility that the Muslims have towards Palestine, that they have let it down and they allowed it to be occupied by the lowest of the people, and then being part of your aqidah, if you put that together, it is a very strong galvanizing force to the Muslims. So
it's not that the Hindus of India are not any better, Sheikh.
I'm coming to the non-Muslims. I'm coming to the non-Muslims. And we should keep it as such. The importance of jihad in Palestine is not necessarily to free Palestine by the Mujahideen in Palestine and the what's going on in Palestine by the Muslims in Palestine. We know and they know. And if you ask anybody who's fighting in Palestine, he will tell you, my fighting in Palestine is not going to free Palestine. But the importance of this fight or this fighting is to keep this as a beacon of light to make sure that it is continually reminding Muslims about the responsibility. It is a galvanizing force. It is a reminder that something very important, that is going on. So that's the importance of the jihad in Palestine. But for the rest of the world, They actually, of course, they put a lot of tension and attention to it because, as I said, the struggle in Palestine is a struggle between haq and batil. It is a struggle between the kufr and Islam and Iman. And this is the nature of which. So the whole world has to pay attention to it. It is different than the struggle anywhere else because the Zionist state has been implanted and put in the heart of the Muslim lands as the first line of defense for the kuffar and kufr to battle and struggle against Islam and Muslims if any sincere movement were to happen. So, of course, it takes its importance from that, not just because it's a holy land, not because it's part of our aqidah. It is also for the kuffar because that's their first line of defense. That's why everybody has to support it. That's why everybody has to stand with it. Now, the fact that a lot of non-Muslims are supporting and are against the official stance of their governments, like they did an opinion poll and they found that more than 70% of those who are under the age of 35 are supporting the Muslims and their issue in Palestine. And those who are over 35 years, I'm talking about the US. So those who are over 35 years of old, more than 70% are supportive to the Zionists and their agenda. So because of the social media and people are not that much blinded and they're sick and tired of capitalism and capitalism has failed them and it is a hypocrisy that everybody say. So that's why they're actually turning away from democracy and believing what these democratic regimes say to some sense and say, well, we don't support that. So it is not a surprise, not just because it's Palestine, but because it's a lot of times common sense.
So we have two questions here.
Can I just
one,
put my phone on the charger for a quick minute?
yeah, go ahead.
I'm ready, Chef. Go ahead.
The number one question is, what is the nature of the relationship between Hamas and Israel? Although, the previous question, there is more questions coming up with it. That your answer brought in more questions, but let's go to this one here. That what is
Inshallah. So I'm not a spokesman of Hamas. I'm not a spokesman of any political organization in Palestine. I might carry the ideas of one group and I can speak on its behalf, but there is no relationship. So those who carry again their souls in their hands and they go out to die fi sabilillah do not recognize so-called Israel and the Zionist state. They do not have any relationship. The only relationship is a relationship of an occupier and occupied. So a killer and a victim. That's the only relationship. So
okay,
and that's
and the
proven on the
second,
ground.
okay, and the second question is: will Israel's blatant dismissal of international law encourage other states to act as they wish?
This I have to answer with some political analysis very quickly. So actually, America came and Biden came with 100% full support and promise to the Jewish state, but also with a condition that look, we come with 100% full support. We back you up. We've said that. We are saying that. We will say that. We will not allow anything to happen to you, but you gotta agree with our deal, which is accepting to finalize the so-called peace process, the two-state solution, so that America can look after other interests in the region. So, of course, when the Zionist state and so-called Israel sees all of that support, they do understand that it comes with a condition, but when they see that unlimited, unconditional support that has been given to them, as we said, they're the ones who established them, and they're the ones who their responsibility is to sustain and protect them. They will act like a wild kid who may not listen to their father. So they will break the law. They will not pay any attention to the Geneva Convention, the international law, all of that, because they know no one is going to punish them and hold them accountable. Whether that is going to encourage other states to do that, they're already doing that against Islam and Muslims. If you look at what's going on in China, what's going on in Kashmir, what's going on, or what went on in Syria and still going on in Syria by Russia and its allies, we can tell that it's been done, it's going on, and will continue to be so until we have a unity that will protect Islam and Muslims and will protect the lands that we live in or we don't live in. So unless that happens and until that happens, it will continue to happen.
Inshallah, it's been almost hour and a half, Sheikh. So inshallah, what we'll end it with that. But I would like to still give you maybe just 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds to summarize the situation, Sheikh. How long? Well, I guess even with the question, are we? What are we timeline wise? I guess what are we looking at now? I mean, what do you see happening in the next few days? I mean, there's a conference that has been convened. There's pressure both on Israel and whoever is in authority now in Gaza. There is all so-called rulers have come together and they're talking about this situation. What do you see, Sheikh? There will be now a two-state solution?
So I will tell you what I hope and I pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will happen, and I'll tell you what might happen. So what we pray Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will happen, that Muslims wake up and the Muslim sincere Muslim generals and sincere Muslim commanders of the army wake up, remove these corrupt or one of these corrupt rulers and come to the aid of the Muslims. Declare that this is a move for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help our brothers and sisters come to their aid, defeat and kick out the occupation and protect the honor of the Muslims. That's number one. Number two, we also hope that such conferences and such meetings and such conspiracies from the kuffar and their allies and their agents of the Arab rulers and the Muslim rulers do not come forth to be fruitful and do not agree. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the Yahud and the Jewish and the Zionist state do not move forward to kill and further attack and further destroy Muslims and cause more death and more suffering of the Muslims. So that's what we hope happens, inshallah. What I think may happen is that America, by its tools and allies and its forces and its political, if you want, will and political maneuvers, might be able to impose and enforce and push forth a final solution and final dealings regarding the two-state solution, the peace process, and forcing the Jewish entity and the Zionist entity to agree to sign the deal that will, for them to be permanent, that will chain. And unfortunately, this is not a deal for our sake. This does not benefit us. That will chain and undermine every Muslim who says otherwise, and that will push forth the kufr agenda to indoctrinate more Muslims, to put to sleep the issue of Palestine, not to make that as a galvanizing, as a centralizing force for all Muslims to come to aid of the Muslims. So that might happen. So America might be able to. So we might see in the next maybe a couple of weeks. So by the way, the within the Jewish entity and the politicians, there is almost consensus not to go ground invasion. So that's almost consensus. But the arrogance and the pride of the Netanyahu is not allowing him to not think about that. So if they go out of arrogance and out of the planning of Allah, may Allah make their graveyard be there. But the consensus among the Yahud is not to go on the ground, invasion.
All right, Sheikh, Jazakallah khair. Although there is one more question, but it's on you to answer it. I mean, is it a surprise
Oh, yeah,
that...
Sheikh. Please go ahead, no problem.
The question is basically, is there... G20 just happened, and I guess, do you see that anything, because of G20, the yani what we are seeing, we saw India, for instance, here says, India was being pressured with the killing of the Khalistani politician or movement in Canada, and then it seemed like India was being pressured to kind of accept certain policies by the United States, because that's one thing, and then uh, all of this kind of happening after G20. Almost everyone that was there has been pressured to do something for the United States. Do you also see what has happened here as something that could have been planned after the G20? That not that exactly October 7th. Again, that's not. I'm not, implying that. But what I'm saying is there were pressure points put on almost everyone that attended G20 to make sure that they go with the plan of the United States.
Look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says already in the Quran that the kuffar already spend their time, their money, their wealth, and all of that. So they do not stop conspiring and planning. And we know that America controls the world arena from the political and economic and military attributes. It has 100% full grab over that. So we know that. So, and we know for the best interest of India or even UK is to share and fulfill and be part of, and not to upset the American, policies in the area. So for their best interest is to actually follow along and get along with their policies. So we know that. But again, I don't see a direct connection between what went on September 7th. I'm sorry, on October 7th and the G20 and hence wise. But America will ride the wave, and America will take advantage. America will shift things around. America will conspire. America will incite. I will not be surprised that America had incited through its agents, whether they're Arab or non-Arab, many things, and they may facilitate and they may give information. Not to say that the other side or Hamas or the Jihad or they agree to any. No, I'm not saying that, but America will ease for their own interest, and they will facilitate, and they may leak information to allow something to happen, and then after that take advantage of it. So
That
that is very
question brought another
possible.
question here regarding Egypt and Saudi Arabia. The question is, we are seeing that Egypt. It seems, at least what's here is that it seems that Egypt felt almost was becoming a non-player in the peace, in the political process between what was happening in the region here. And Saudi Arabia seemed to have taken a lead on this. Do you think that what is happening, and then of course this is in the backdrop of Egypt? It seems, at least from some newspapers, that Egypt was warning regarding something could happen from Gaza more than once to Netanyahu. Netanyahu did not take it seriously. Do you think, Akhi, that Egypt, and now it's not surprised that the conference is also happening in Egypt. Was it two questions? One is are Egypt and Saudi Arabia, when it comes to their own foreign policies, do they have anything of this sort where they have their policies? And second, knowing that Egypt it receives second most aid from the United States, would becoming a non-player become a economic threat for Egypt, and hence we see certain actions taking place by that people could think it's Egypt?
Jazakallah khair. You actually give him too much credit. These are nothing but shoes, worn by actually very dirty, very very old shoes worn by their masters. They don't have no weight. They don't have any of their own policies and just nothing but to fulfill the strategic policies and plans and an agenda that the kuffar has for them, and mainly America. They are nothing but American agents. They are dogs. They only play the role that is given to them. They only say what they're supposed to say, what they're told to say. The role they play is not to serve their own interest. If they have any, the interest of the Muslims in Egypt is not being served or looked after or being even considered by Sisi or those Muslims in Saudi Arabia by MBS. They only look for their role that is they're given by their masters. America assigned them that role, and America will decide for them what to do, when to do it, how to say it, when to say it. We don't give them too much credit. They have no value like that to say that they're. So I guess. So the second part of the question is null and void, because if if that's their reality, then of course they have no policy. There's no agenda whatsoever.
All right, khair inshallah. Dr. Ayman, Jazakallah khair for your time. I know, I'm sure you're exhausted, and but these are times that people are looking for answers, trying to figure out what needs to be done. And of course, this is not the last time. We will continue to depend on you, to call on you to come and discuss what needs to be discussed, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for your time. May Allah protect you and your family. And for the rest of you, brothers and sisters, obviously, the whole ummah is concerned. The whole ummah is looking at what is taking place in Gaza. Those who are active in the Muslim community, whether you give khutbahs, whether you are, you deal with the Muslims, you are seeing the concerns of the Muslims. Subhanallah, I've never had a situation where if somebody is not giving a khutbah on Palestine, where that imam is now being criticized, saying, is there anything else to talk about other than what is taking place in Masjid al-Aqsa or Bayt al-Maqdis or Gaza or Palestine right now? So these are things that show us great signs of change, coming change, that the ummah is tired and the ummah is looking for change. Ummah is, literally, their dua yesterday, I remember in Jum'ahs, imams are making dua saying, oh Allah, unite the guns of the Muslims, unite the armies of the Muslims, unite the tanks of the Muslims, give tawfiq to these these leadership, or remove them and bring Salah ad-Din and the likes to come and rule us. And you see that, subhanAllah, whether Arab or non-Arab, you see the kind of pain, and that the Muslims are clearly showing that we are with the Muslims. The ummah is one, the blood is one, the pain is one, the suffering is one. There's no question about that. So, final thought, brothers and sisters, we cannot, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, we cannot be of those people who will forget what is taking place in Palestine today. We need to make sure that we don't forget, but we know what happened, and that we continuously do what it takes until we establish what Allah asks us to establish, which is the deen of Islam. And with that, we'll see you next time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر. لا 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 لن يطول الظلام، ديننا لن يضام، نحن جيل همام، نحن فينا عمر. صبح بدا نور ظهر، نجم وشمس وقمر، ألقى على الدنيا الدرر. هذا عمر، هذا عمر، كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر، كي تستفيد من العبر. هذا عمر، هذا عمر. لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا عمر. لا لن تدوم الجراح، بل سيأتي الصباح، نحن أهل الكفاح، نحن فينا